Hi, I'm Nancy Flournoy, Dr. Nancy Flournoy. I'm happy to be with you tonight to talk about Lifewave's SP6 patch. My background is biostatistics, biomathematics. I am a doctor, but not a doctor of medicine. I've done most of my life research is clinical, medically related. And I have found that learning about these Lifewave patches has been a great way to catch up with what's being learned in biology and biochemistry. And tonight we're fortunate in the audience to have a real biochemist. So I hope to learn more even after the talk is finished. So with that introduction, I am going to share my screen. So you need to tell me if you don't see it. So I hope that is, you see the first slide there. This is the introduction.
I don't see it.
You don't see it. Okay, so let's see what happened. We have share the screen. Okay. Sometimes the buttons are off the side of the screen and we don't see them. So now I hope you see it.
Yes.
Okay, good. Thanks. So the front page here shows the package that the Lifewave patches come in, this being the SP6 package. A little round circle here is what the patches look like, and you can see that they're just a little over an inch in diameter, and you peel back the sides and you plop them on and you're ready to go. So very, very convenient delivery system. The comments on the front page here are the statements that Lifewave has approval from the FDA to state. So there are things that have been proven to the satisfaction of the Food and Drug Administration, and they're just the tip of the iceberg, as I'll explain. So they're designed, at least they're marketed to help you reduce cravings, including things that would lead you to overeat. And so with that sort of just mild statements in mind, we're going to look a little deeper. So first, let me tell you that all the Lifewave patches are a patented proprietary form of phototherapy. They're targeted, passive, wireless nanotechnology with nano antenna. So there's no drugs, no chemicals, no stimulants, no side effects. Occasionally, somebody may be allergic to the adhesive on the patch, and there are workarounds for that. But the phototherapy itself seems to be quite does what it's directed to do, and doesn't cause you other problems. So here's just a little setup to remind you of how light might affect things and how one can get different wavelengths. The patches themselves are actually made of crystals, and crystals have been used for centuries to diffract light, and you see this prism putting the light out in many, many different colors. And what the Lifewave patch does is just select specific frequencies out and send them to you. Now, the idea behind the patches was to increase the production of a specific metabolite, different patches doing different things. The references I have down here on the bottom are some of the early work to establish the basic ways in which the patches operate. This SP6 patch is the only patch that's named after an acupuncture site. Most of the patches are actually named after the metabolite that is targeted, that's supposed, that has its production increased, or some other reference to it. And from virtually all the other patches, we've been told what they do. In fact, for all of them, I think we've been told what it is specifically that's targeted. That's not the case for the SP6. So we have to do a little sluicing around to try and get at what exactly is happening with this patch. So one of the sites that's recommended for use, well, so the patch itself is named after this site here on the ankle, which is at the intersection of the liver, kidney, and spleen meridians. And that patch is used in Chinese medicine for people being too fat or too thin, to regulate weight loss and weight gain. And it's also used to treat sour stomachs and loss of appetite. So it's certainly named with weight loss and weight regulation in mind. Now, I've heard David Schmitz, the CEO of Lifewave, I've heard him talk about this patch in 2 different occasions. And although he hasn't said what metabolite it was directed to increase, I've heard him twice mention that this point is on a meridian that is a superhighway to the hypothalamus. Now, I have looked at many different. I've tried to trace down where he gets this information. So I've looked just on the web for many different meridian pictures, and they all seem to be pretty loose when it comes to the brain. So that is also a something to learn more about. But at least according to David, and he has lots of equipment for tracing thermography and the way different materials are transported through the brain. So I don't doubt that he knows what he's talking about, but I've not seen the documentation of that. But it's really clear that he is looking to the stimulus from this patch to affect the hypothalamus. So with those keys in mind, then in this talk, we're going to look at the hypothalamus and how it's related to weight. And then at the end of the talk, we'll talk about what the studies have actually been done with the Lifewave patch. That is the formal studies that have been published. So just, I've used this slide before in other talks, but, and I'll just, in case you haven't heard them, it looks like the last 3 talks have all dealt with the hypothalamus in different ways. The hypothalamus is integral to the Eon patch, the Silent Night patch, the Nirvana patch, and now we have the SP6, and they all are directed at different aspects of the hypothalamus. But what this picture is intended to do, the hypothalamus is up here at the top, it's a little spot in the brain that's blown up, and the little balls that hang down look like testicles. That's the pituitary gland. The point is that from the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, the many hormones get or neurotransmitters, signals get sent throughout the body, either as hormones or as other kinds of messengers to throughout the body. And at these other locations, then other hormones are produced, like your thyroid and estrogen and testosterone. And when they're produced, then there's this great big feedback loop that comes back and tells the pituitary gland and the hypothalamus how things are working. And so so the whole collection gets balanced. And when I was sort of researching this bigger picture of how all the messaging and the hormones work together, I came across a word I had to look up, but it was quite informative, and that's the word entrained. And the word entrained is references, it's like harmonics, it's like wavelengths, it's the process by which different signals that are traveling at different frequencies become attuned to each other and synchronized. So it's like if you have several women in a family, they might all have their period at the same time. And there are numerous examples of that, but within your own body, it's all of these activities that have a resonance to them becoming sensitive to each other and acting together. So what affects one affects all, so to speak. So that's kind of the big picture view. Now, there are several hypotheses related to hunger, and actually they're all the specifics of the hypothesis may or may not be completely worked out, but the 4 categories are certainly all related to hunger. And so one, glucose static, that means having your glucose in some balance, stasis, is going to regulate your hunger, because when your glucose utilization is low, your blood glucose gets low, and then neuron activity decreases, and that tells the feeding center in the hypothalamus that you should eat something, and so you get hungry. And the same thing with lipostatic, lipos fat. And so here we have the adipose tissue, that's your fat tissue, your bulky fat tissue that's like under the skin, that, you know, it's kind of the cushion that you don't want too much of it, but you certainly want to have something to protect you if you fall. And if you have a lot of fat, then it's going to send a signal to the hypothalamus to tell you this, that you don't want to eat so much, and that you should be more active. There are also signals that come from the gut. There are hormones that will inhibit food intake, particularly after you've eaten a big meal, and they'll tell you that you're satisfied. You don't need to eat anymore. And then the last one is thermostatic, and that's when your body temperature has dropped, and you're going to be hungry because your body is telling you you're going to need more food just to keep yourself warm. So we're not going to really talk about the thermostatic hypothesis, and not much about the gut, but we'll say more about glucose and fat. So here, this is the picture in the middle is a slice of the hypothalamus, and we have little centers of it that are colored in green and in red. And the ones colored in green are called the hunger center, and the ones in red are the satiety center. And when your blood sugar drops, receptors in the blood take a message to the green centers, and it causes a bunch of neurons to fire, and it then tells you you're hungry. And when your blood sugar rises, then just the opposite happens, except the message about being full goes to this other little part of the hypothalamus, and you get the message that you're full. So this is a little bigger schematic, where here we've got the little box representing this part of the hypothalamus at the top. And at the bottom, we have different tissues that are going to be sending those messages. And so on the left, we have adipocyte, which is a name of a special cell in the fat tissue that secretes this hormone leptin, which is what then goes to the hypothalamus to send messages from the fat. And from the pancreas, we get insulin, and most people have heard of insulin because diabetes is such a big problem. And then from the liver and the gut, there is this hormone called ghrelin. And in terms of the blood supply, these are all tapped into or serviced by the vagus nerve, which is the big nerve that takes care of your heart beating and sort of all of the activities, all the major activities that keep you alive that you don't think about much. So I'm going to say a little bit about each of these substances. And to start with insulin, I won't say a lot because obviously, you know, as I say, diabetes is big stuff, and there's lots and lots and lots of research on insulin, but it's made in the pancreas. It allows your cells to take sugar or glucose from the bloodstream to use as energy. So that's what it's good for. And there is if you eat a meal that's high in refined or simple carbohydrates, like white pasta or white bread, then when it will secrete, your pancreas is going to secrete enough insulin that you are going to have a real gnawing desire to eat, which is not pleasant. Now for ghrelin, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but it's called the hunger hormone. And it's in the center of this diagram with all the things that it does scanned around it. But it's coming out of your stomach and your liver, and it then is telling your hypothalamus and your pituitary gland that you're to be hungry. And during periods of low sugar, when your blood sugar is low, it's the time when your growth hormone levels are elevated and your insulin levels will be at the lowest, and that's when it's going to be produced. So it not only regulates appetite and therefore has to do with keeping your energy balanced, but it has to do with your cleaning up your dead cells, regulating the vascular tone of your heart and all your vessels, and a number of other activities which we won't go into. I will just say that from the ghrelin and then the leptin, which we will also talk about in the next slide probably, that any changes in the normal production of these hormones can lead to obesity. So one wants to have this whole system working well, and it's often referred to as the hypothalamus axis between these different organs and the hypothalamus. So leptin, this is the one that is going to tell you that you're full. So in the center, we have a picture of a rat that's on a normal diet, and over here, the little circles that represent the adipose tissue, and they make the leptin that goes to the brain. And then this, in the box up here, you have a nerve cell, and the little green, these little red arrows are the leptin getting caught up in the nerve cell. So the nerve cell goes in, and the receptors catch a hold of it. And that says, okay, you're full. So if this nerve cell is damaged, you see the little scissors that are sort of snipping away at the receptors. If the receptors are damaged, if they're not functioning properly, then the rat makes a whole lot more adipose tissue. It makes the leptin, but the brain becomes immune to having so much leptin go up that it quits listening, like you quit listening to the train that goes down the track, and so the rat just keeps eating, and that's not a very satisfactory outcome. So we want the leptin and the ghrelin to be in balance. And this slide just basically says what I told you on the last slide, so I won't read it. So that's looking at appetite and food from the point of view of the hunger center of the hypothalamus. But hunger is much more complex than that. And in particular, craving. And so people who have cravings, whether they be for food or for other things, have been classified into these 5 different categories: crashed, stressed, comfort, depressed, and fatigued. And each of them have to do with some deficit in their system. And all of these deficits, either directly or indirectly, have to do with the hypothalamus. So what we were just pretty much, we were talking about was the low blood sugar. We talked about the blood sugar and the fat, but crashed is the term that's given to people that have a low blood sugar. So let's look at that first. Your blood sugar drops. Most of us have been in this situation, if not chronically, at least some time, where you get hypoglycemic. So your blood sugar level dropped, you can feel tense, maybe you're even dizzy, you can't focus, and it leads you to go looking for something fast like sugar. And people that get into the habit of having low blood sugar go for sweets and sugar, too much sugar. This can usually be rectified just by eating a lot of protein, fiber, and saturated fat. Now, as I go through these next few slides, there's going to be some amino acids that show up in purple. Glutamine is the first one, and I will summarize them at the end of this little discussion of different types of cravers, so you don't have to remember them all. But glutamine is pretty good at restoring your blood sugar balance if you can get it where it needs to go. And I'll show you here, this little diagram. Glutamine, we're talking about a chemical that it's actually the most abundant amino acid in the body, and it's made from your muscles. And from it comes 2 other substances, glutamate and GABA, and we'll talk more about those. But it's important most people get glutamine in their diets well. So when there is a dysfunction related to glutamine, it's usually something else down the line that is going wrong. So stressed cravers, one of these, so GABA over here is what's not having enough GABA is related to a stress craver, and that's what's on the next slide. So they don't have enough GABA, and GABA is the primary inhibitor neurotransmitter it blocks signals from the brain, from the nerves to the brain. And it's what slows you down, makes you relax. So if you are a stressed craver, then you're tending to eat chips and nuts and junk food. And we've talked about GABA with respect to at least 2 other patches before. GABA, if not 3. So right now we're looking at GABA from the point of view of weight. But as I say, we have looked at it from other points of view because it's involved in a lot in how our body functions. And this is sort of the summary overview. That is, we have the glutamine that makes the glutamate and the GABA, and the glutamate's the gas and the GABA is the brake. And I first learned about this description and about these 2 chemicals from my friend Annie Lennertz, who was actually on the call tonight. So thank you, Andy. And since he introduced them to me, I see them everywhere, and this is no exception. So what you want is for your GABA and your glutamate to be in balance, but balance is kind of a stochastic thing. If you have too much glutamate and not enough GABA, then you're going to be restless, having migraines and lots of trouble. But as this bottom slide shows, you want balance doesn't mean the same all the time, because what we have is the GABA coming up at night and going down in the morning, and the glutamate going being up during the day and going down at night and back up when you're going to wake up. So balance is sort of a time process that doesn't mean equal. So the next type of craver is a comfort craver, and they've gotten dependent on the endorphin surges that come with spikes that are like taking drugs or may be drugs, but it can also be just sugar and chocolate and ice cream and pastries, and they get a high from it. They get an endorphin, and so they are they're drugging themselves with the sugars in order to makes them feel better, or they think it makes them feel better, and it makes them feel better according to what they've decided they like. And again, these can be mellowed down with enough protein. And there's an amino acid, D-phenylalanine, so that can help. And as I say, virtually all of this is regulated, the endorphin levels, in the hypothalamus. So we have fatigue cravers, and there's this long word, a bunch of things that are going to be low, but if we look down here, we find out that some of these things are dopamine, which is the happy drug, and adrenaline, which is going to, get you up and going. So there is a collection of hormones that are made in your adrenal glands. And again, they're going to get the signals from the hypothalamus. It's all related. And dopamine is also made in the hypothalamus. At any rate, the adrenal glands and the hypothalamus are definitely in cahoots with each other. And if you're low on these, hormones, then you're going to be verging on depression, or maybe depressed. And again, there's an amino acid here, tyrosine, that helps to energize you and make you feel rewarded. I think this is the last one, the depressed or the anxious craver. And they are low in serotonin, which is one of the happy hormones that's produced in the hypothalamus. So these people gorge on high carb foods, particularly say when it's nighttime or during the winter, or maybe just in the afternoon because they decided they need a lot of potato chips. And they go after these foods at a time when the natural serotonin levels are at their lowest in the brain. And the serotonin is a natural antidepressant, so they're trying to get it to kick in. So this is the summary of amino acids that are involved in the different kinds of cravings. And we talked more about some of these than others, but what I want to say is that they're all very closely related to each other. Either, as we talked before, because all of the hormones are entrained to some extent and affecting each other, but also structurally. I'll show you another picture in a minute, but we have this phenylalanine, which is related to dopamine and adrenaline and the tyrosine, and they get I'll show you a picture in a minute. And then in terms of how they react, they're related. So one needs everything to work together. I'm not going to go into details on here. I will just say that Lee, you can come back and look at the slides later if you want to see more details on those connections. But I'm going to change topics now and go from what I have discovered about the hypothalamus and weight loss. Again, trying to keep it all connected to that part of the brain, which David Schmidt has said he is trying to target with the SP6 patch. So on the lifewave.com page, if you scroll to the very bottom, there's a research and science section. They have a lot, not all. I found papers published that they didn't get on their page, but it's pretty complete. Collection of publications. And so these are the three spots that they recommend for using the patch, and the SP6 point itself is the top one. I will just say that the lawyers for Lifewave have told them that they should only recommend places where they have actually done studies. And so that's really very limited because there are lots of other places to put these patches. And in fact, there is a whole group that has been connected to the acupuncture community that has what they call patching protocols. And they have a whole repertoire of where to put patches for different symptoms that connect to the way that an acupuncture would use the acupuncture sites. And so, these sites are definitely of interest, but they're not necessarily, one doesn't want to be restricted to the sites that are actually, one doesn't want to be limited by the recommendations. So here's the 4 papers that I'll say a little bit about each of them, because here's just sort of an overview. 4 papers Basically, all those studies, I think, started in 2009, but 2009 to 2012. So let's look at the 2012 study. Dr. Nazrin is retired. He was a professor of engineering at the University of Texas in El Paso. Blake Greenberg, I looked her up, and she is a practitioner. She actually has this piece of equipment, this electrointerstitial scan machine. And the last time I looked, she was in Palos Verdes, California, and you could actually go down and for not very much money, have this assessment done on yourself. It looked pretty cool. I think if I was hanging around that part of the country, I might just do it to see. So this machine is equipment. It's basically, you can see the person's got their hands on these plates, and the ones I've seen are gold. That doesn't look gold because gold conducts electricity well, but measurements are taken from the fingertips, and then there'll be electrons, as you can see on the right-hand side. There'll be electrodes put, someplace else. Here they're showing them on the foot. We've seen them on the head, other places. So they put them several different places in order to map the flow, the conductivity through your body. And it's like an EKG, but the medical grade equipment, this has to do with virtually all the pieces of equipment that are used to study the Lifewave products. The medical equipment tends to be looking at much higher frequencies than is of interest in this research. And you can sort of see that with this picture on the top right, where we have, these are cells, and the red lines show high frequency energy just come blasting through the cell, just sort of in and out, and it's gone. And that's whether the cells are well oxygenated or not. The high energy just blasts through, and so you can't really tell what's going on. You can't really discriminate between how well so there's the electrical messages, and messages that are transmitted electrically, which is specifically related with the conductivity, but it's also telling you more, because if you look at the picture on the left, you've got quite a bit of oxygen in the cells, actually more than normal. But at these low frequencies, the energy that's being measured is going to not go through the cell, it goes around the cell. And therefore, it's really getting at more how much fluid and space and room is there for nutrition and information and signals to actually get to the cell. Now, if there's something on the outside of the cell, then there's other processes for getting things from outside the cell to inside the cell. But certainly it goes blasting through the cell so fast it can't stop. That's not going to do the cell much good. And what this is looking at really is measuring the quality of the fluid area around the cell. And so if you look at the picture on the right, where the oxygen's been decreased, the cells have blown up, and there's virtually no space between the cells. And so you see this big, thick green line, which might have represented the ability of nutrients to nourish the cells, is now a thin little line. Nothing's getting through. So one thing that various patches do is increase the conductivity of the tissue around the cells. What is being done here is one's measuring the the conductivity around the cells before and after patching. So having said that, they this study had 10 subjects, and so this was self, patients, subjects with their own controls, and they had no, they took measurements before they were patched, 30 minutes after patching, and after wearing 12 hours a day for 1 week. And they analyzed 8 different organs that were triangulated from these this equipment we just talked about. And every organ that they looked at had improved function except the adrenal glands. And I highlighted the hypothalamus since that was basically the start of our discussion in this talk. So, and this is just for 1 week. Another talk looked at using the SP6 for 4 weeks, and was not and looked at weight itself as an endpoint, weight and the circumference of your waist. And so they had really sort of one scientist, when they say site 1 and site 2, they're talking about one scientist in one location, another scientist in another location. So one scientist did a total of 44 subjects, and in one group, they had them fast for 2 days before they started the program, and the other they did not fast. And then at the second site, they had another 20 subjects that did not fast. So the results were that the results were generally in agreement between the 2 independent sites. And then on average, they lost approximately 5 pounds of weight. It's not huge, but it's okay. But they lost, and they lost 1.5 inches in their circumference of their waist. So one thing that they discovered was that the weight loss was greater if they did the fasting than if they didn't do the fasting. And so it was a 20% improvement in the weight loss. And it was a 6.5% improvement in the change of the size of your waist. So one of the things that the CEO, David Schmidt, has really gotten on personally is what he calls intermittent fasting. And we'll not go into that now, but I'm sure we'll be talking about that more at other times. There was also a 4-week study by a Dr. Grinwald, and he took 20 subjects and studied them over the 4-week period. And on average, they had a 3.5 kilogram reduction in weight and a 3 to 6 centimeter reduction in circumference. 4 of the subjects didn't have any change at all. So they declared it a success in 75% of the subjects. Weight's complicated, so the average would include those that didn't have any weight loss at all. You can take the data for what it is. One could certainly do a lot more studies. And that's what they have. So in addition to that, one can go to their website and look at testimonials from people that have had their own personal experience with weight and weight loss. And I've heard some. So the disclaimer is that I'm not a medical doctor, and Lifewave does not claim to treat any illnesses. They are the patches and their other products are for your health and your well-being. And so there's no if you have a severe problem with weight or diabetes or any specific illness, you should discuss things with your doctor. And with that, I will just say that you can find my talks on my YouTube channel, which now has a handle, which is just my name. I have a website I need to update, lightpatchscience.com. I do want to make a call out to this book. If you're interested in cravings, Candace Pert Candace Pert is passed, bless her soul. But she has a book called The Molecules of Emotion, which really was the first. I mean, she was a biochemist herself, and she was the first scientist to discover that there were receptors for morphine. It was the first thing that was studied in the stomach as well as the brain. It was quite radical. And she has a film, she's in a film that is on, that you can find on YouTube. Just type in the title and you can find it. What the bleep do I know? That's about cravings. It's really fun to watch. It's very interesting. I mean, it's fun and it's informative. Now, I talk on the first and third Fridays of each month, and my colleague, John Bishop, who seems to be lost in Japan at the moment, talks on the second and fourth Friday and Saturday every month. And I talk about the different patches themselves and the science surrounding what I can learn, it has to do about the patches. And John talks about Lifewave as a business and what one might want to know if one actually wants to try to make money selling the patches. So with that, I will say adieu, and I will stop sharing my screen and turn off my